How's it going, Bob? Doing better. I did well my job interview. Good for you. He gave instructions that we need, but they couldn't make head or tail of them. You can't do things at one time. It's out of the question. Do them one by one. Bob, don't disturb her. Mind on your own business, he whispered. If he persisted bothering her like that, she'd lose her temper. He was so charged that he couldn't resist temptation. Stop making a fuss, it really gets on my nerves, she shouted. Jordan opened to talking back to Nick. He's the dictator, so to speak. They are very polite in his presence, but actually, they already talking about him behind his back. You despise Nick, don't you? On the contrary, I look up to him. His constant insults aroused her anger. I'm fed up with justifying papers and pouring coffee. I made up my mind to quit. In reality, many people have difficulties making ends meet. How can I get one on my 100,000 a month? Female clerks may well complain about their routines, which are not challenging at all. Thanks to fundamental restructuring, our surplus has swelled threefold. Many people today think of loyalty to a company as an absurd notion. I have to commute all the way from the distant suburb. I'm sick of it. I want to spend the rest of my life pursuing my ideals. After retirement, Teresa devoted herself to caring for orphans. For the sake of children in need, were cooperated to collect donations. The charity named after a man who gave away some 2 billion yen. His autobiography was released today and sold out by noon. Ted, who is often referred to as Palm Integrity, is going to run for mayor. The candidate was disappointed with the outcome of the election. The municipal council should be concentrated on more specific issues. It is a kept that some who live on a pension are forced to lead a hard life. We should leave out this data. It's far from accurate. We tend to associate with politicians with hypocrisy. They are primarily concerned with exploiting us, not with enhancing our living standards. The man exerted a dominant influence on a conservative party. Now his power is diminishing. The spokesman refused to make any comment, saying it's under investigation. The police said that someone pulling strings behind the scenes. The executive entertained bureaucrat at Ryotei, or exclusive Japanese restaurant, hoping for something in return. His secretary flatly denied leaking any confidential information. No one dared to contradict his or her employer for fear of being fired. He sacrificed his promising career to retain his dignity. I might well kill myself and reconcile myself to my fate. He was about to commit suicide by swallowing poison when he thought better of it. That vague rumor proved to be false. Nevertheless, some skepticism lingers on. A senior official is suspected of accepting bribes from the company, but there isn't sufficient evidence to arrest him. Tyson, who was in charge of the project, was dismissed for corruption. To my knowledge, he was not involved in the fraud scheme. They found out the truth by examining a pile of relevant documents. During the trial, it came to light that they have been covering up illegal transactions for decades. The detective took down his testimony on the spot, word for word. For the first time in my life, I felt a pang of conscience, but there was no other way out. I'm still haunted by a vivid nightmare I had last night. By and large, reporters don't hesitate to intrude on one's privacy. They also revised manuscript over and over again. He's second to none when it comes to fault with others. On the whole, the elite are not sensitive to criticism. When the tabloid revealed that he was a drug addict, his reputation was all but ruined. They considered every aspect of the defense program and pointed out the numerous flaws. We will not tolerate anyone who engages in terrorism. The Notre was ultimately captured and confined to jail. Troops were swiftly called in to put down the riot. We should appeal to reason instead of resorting to violence. I suggest we adapt the flexible tactics for the moment. The armed forces succeeded in occupying the entire territory. Under the circumstances, the enemy had no choice but to surrender. They can't hold out any longer. Sooner or later, the hostages will be set free. Under Roman tyranny, innocent people were deprived of their citizenship. Some soldiers were reluctant to obey the command. His regime was bound to collapse. The Allied condemned the invasion as a violation of UN resolutions. Louisiana's ruler's possibility was civil war that break out in that country. The colony declared independence and became a republic. An immense monument was erected in honor of the noble patriot. He got down on his knees and prayed for the souls of the deceased. The Supreme Court located near the Imperial Palace. The protest group protested against the ban on abortion. Senator Ford remained neutral at bitter controversy. Ford has been in a difficult situation all week long. He is no longer capable of coping with it. The sound talks are to be broadcast simultaneously throughout the world. Diplomats likely helped put an end of the conflict. Johnson was appointed a goodwill ambassador to foster mutual understanding between the two nations. The specialist political international tension will build up. In my opinion, permanent peace is nothing but an illusion. Ethnic minorities struggle against prejudice, poverty, and oppression. We must make every effort to away all discrimination. The immigrants have endured physical and mental pain. The amendment was rejected because it didn't take racial diversity into account. Needless to say, the refugees are longing for freedom. According to a survey, 3 in 5 people today are indifferent foreign affairs. What will become of the Japanese relation if the security treaty expires? Unless Japan eliminates its unfair tariffs, the US will impose sanctions. Trade friction might arise between the two nations at any moment. At our top priority is to settle dispute once and for all, so we are ready to meet them halfway. The federal budget narrowly approved by Congress. He argues the administration must look for alternative sources of revenue. But opposes that overwhelming majority are favorable of legislation. The cops are searching for clues to the brutal murder. The man must be insane. He can distinguish vice from virtue. The fingerprint left on the weapon corresponded with the suspect. It is also surprising when the noted psychologist was accused of kidnapping. The jury's guilty verdict gave rise to a widely spread debate. The man pleaded for mercy, but he was sentenced to 22 years prison for his crime. The officer on duty perceived an elderly man coming up behind him. He copped out to the chief attempting to break into the house. That day before yesterday, he witnessed a weird incident in the wilderness. I became aware of someone staring at me from across the aisle, so I turned around, but there was no one in sight. She screamed with horror as someone took hold of her arm. Informed of her safety, he breathed a sigh of relief. The bullet penetrated his chest, leaving him in critical condition. At present, it is uncertain it was deliberately of accident. The delicate fire burned down, leaving a heap of ashes. All of a sudden, the fireworks warehouse exploded, and it took 2 days to put out the blaze. A bomb went off in the 30-story building, and more than 50 people were seriously wounded. A cargo vessel bound Ascent sank in the Mediterranean without a trace. The reckless one froze to death during the expedition to the Antarctic. The authorities must remember so as not to be repeated. The exchange offers a profound insight into ancient civilization. Giotto is credited for sorting the seeds to the Italian Renaissance, but mounted a portrait in a fancy frame, but it was upside down. This magnificent cathedral dates back to the Middle Ages. Asian religions inspired him to create splendid sculptures. They explored the desert in search of the buried treasure. The minimal set of acquiring the masterpiece, no matter how much it cost. Myth and legend should be handed down from generation to generation. The linguist is fluent in several Chinese dialects. The tribe worships its ancestors and speaks its own language, which is not familiar to us. The answer for this says all the customs still prevail in the province. The wicked witch cast an evil spell on the man and turned him into a bag. They proceeded along the steep path, which was the sole access to the border. When a big ape emerged from the cave, they got frightened, ran away. Believe it or not, I saw an alien, and then it vanished. Give me a break.